Hello everyone, and welcome to my video where I talk about the latest patch. I'm going to go over this fairly quickly. I don't want to waste too much time on the things that don't really matter, and I'm going to spend time on the things that do affect the meta, or at least in my opinion. So these armor changes are not really relevant. Some token heroes got nerfed, and then some other heroes that didn't do well got buffed. Thorn Captain, yeah, doesn't really matter too much. Was a card you almost never picked. Now you pick it a little bit more because it's a 4-2, and whenever the 4-2 is good or you get some cards, fine. Eternal Knight as well, I don't think that really affects the meta. If you roll two of these, it's probably still okay to buy. Overall, I'm not a big fan of this card. Ghoul of the Feast, this is definitely one that affects the meta. This was super strong before the nerf, and I think it's still broken after the nerf. This card was just so powerful that even if you reduce it from +3 attack to +2 attack, it's going to be relevant, absolutely. Now, the way you can look at this is Ground Shaker is a tier 4 minion that requires a blood gem per 2 attack. Sure, this only buffs specific types, but especially early on when your board isn't even full, it's not that hard to get like 3 different types or so and feel pretty good about that. And then you just get attack, 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 attack. And this is fine when you just have regular minions, and it is really good when you have token minions like Icky Imp or Risen Rider in particular, because it's taunt and protects the ghoul. This also buffs itself, which makes it relevant. At the end, it's going to have like, I don't know, like 17 damage or whatever breakpoint that's possible. It's going to be good. So this is still a card that you are very likely going to snap by in the early game, and it's going to allow you to power level and be very strong. So I think that is probably the biggest oversight in this patch, is that this didn't get turned into Avenge 2 or Tier 4 or whatever they wanted to do with the card. But right now, it feels like it's like a nerf that doesn't really affect it too much. Sure, it's not going to be as efficient later in the game, but the real use of this card is to allow you to power level because you're stronger in the early game. Puffer Quill, I think that's just a feel-good change. 4 HP, it just died to bomb. Now it's 6 HP. Feels better, but again, it still does the same thing. It's poison when you need it. Rip Snarl feels like they want to push this mid-range pirate theme where they want to make it stronger. Rip Snarl was already good if you had pirates on your board, but you pretty much always wanted to sell it pretty quickly because you weren't going to stay in the pirates. I don't think this changes anything. It's just better when you get it early. Master of Realities is now a 4-drop. You might say, oh, that's broken with Magmalock, but Magmalock is now a 5-drop, so we'll talk about that again. You know, that just means that Millhouse and Gallywix have easier access to this. If you have, even if you're not Millhouse or Gallywix, if you have a Peggy, a ball of minions, and you roll Master of Realities, that's very powerful because every card you get procs the Peggy buffs the ball is a pirate, but also an elemental. So it's like you get a lot of buffs. So this opens up more tier 4 action with like double Peggy, ball of minions, double Master of Realities. That's now a board you're going to see a lot more often. So be on the lookout for that. You can do that as well. Anubrak is also a very influential change. Before, Anubrak was a 5-drop that gave +2 attack. Now Anubrak is a 4-drop that gives +1 attack on Death Rattle. This means that it's going to be easier to get Anubrak, but it's not going to scale as fast. Before, it felt very unfair if someone did somehow get their hands on an early Anubrak, be it through a triple or whatnot, or just power leveling to 5 and finding it immediately. Now it's going to be easier to get, but it's not going to be as crazy. So I think that makes sense. It doesn't feel as bad. More people have access to it, and it's just not as powerful. I think if you get it early, it is probably still worth going for, especially knowing that you can get Titus or Soulsplitter to still increase the rate of your scaling. So feels like a good change, and feels like the card isn't dead, just weaker. Yeah, but you don't want to buy it too late, of course. Magmalock, we covered that. It's now a 5-drop. I think that's fair. It was a little bit too easy for especially Gallywix or Millhouse to find this thing early and just pop off like crazy. It's still very good. You still make it very, very large. And if you're on tier 5, you can buy it, but now it means that you actually have to level for it or triple into it. Same thing with Soulsplitter. Very, very similar vibes as Magmalock. It just makes sense that it's a 5-drop. It's so good. Make it harder to get. Fewer copies in the pool. Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. Vanessa, same as a Rip Snarl. It's now +2/+2 instead of +2/+1. I don't think this suddenly makes mid-range pirates a thing, because at some point you just reached your potential where the Vanessa scaling isn't really enough. Could be wrong about this, right? Maybe in combination with the Rips Knot is good enough. But I think most of the time you're still going to end up selling out of this in favor for a better engine, such as a Theodore, or of course Hogger. If you get Hogger, you just switch into that, and eventually the Vanessa doesn't really matter anymore because you're getting so many stats from your Salty Looter and Peggy in combination with the Hoggers. Then Cyborg Drake. This card looked really good on release. Wasn't super influential in the meta just because it was tokens, tokens, tokens. And yeah, if you get your Divine Shield procs for free, it doesn't really feel that good. So this got nerfed from +10 to +8, which I think is fair. The card did look really strong. And if the meta is less about tokens, this might already be a preemptive nerf where they say, well, if people start playing poisons and stuff, maybe we shouldn't be giving people very high damage Divine Shields because it's very good at trading into those. All right, Blanche goes from 4/4 to 3/3, so that's not really a functional change. It's going to make it riskier to pick it up because you're more likely to take damage, because also the reborn version is 3/3 instead of 4/4. But in the grand scheme of things, if you have a good setup for it, like with Theodore, if you're buffing it, or you have Bran and you're juicing it up, that's not really going to matter. But it is going to make it more punishing to buy it early, so there's more chance that you lose health for buying a Blanche early. Toxfin from 6 to 5. We didn't really get a chance to feel last meta in terms of poison and whether 6 or 5 was good, because poison wasn't really needed. Everybody was running a lot of big tokens. There were a few outliers, once again, with the Galliwax, Millhouse, or anyone that had a really, really good Magmalock game. Then you suddenly wanted poison, but most of the time you were just trying to beat undead boards, and poison wasn't relevant. So I didn't really get a good gauge for this meta and whether Toxfin should be a 5 or a 6. But I mean, obviously this means that it's easier to get. You can now triple into a Murk-Eye, stay on tier 5, roll into a Toxfin, and still poison your entire board. It's also easier to triple into it from tier 4. But for the most part, if you're having a good Murloc game, you're still going to want to be on 6, because Seafood Chef is on 6, and it's just very nice to be able to buy that and just make a golden Primal Fin, a golden Murk-Eye and whatnot, and have a great game. So yeah, overall, easier to poison stuff, but if you're having a good game, probably still go to 6. Greasespot is now 3/2 instead of 2/2. I don't think that matters too much. It was 3/2 when it was problematic, but it had Divine Shield on itself, and this is a big deal. Anytime you have this scaling engine, something in the back that doesn't make itself bigger, it always just falls behind, and at some point you have to sell it because it just feels so bad to keep it. The things that you can keep on the board are usually very good. Think of, for instance, Ghoul of the Feast. It's weird because it's not really a permanent scaling engine, but it's in the back and it's actually buffing itself, and it's relevant and it trades, and you don't lose health because it's on your board. And this was similar where we had Chalga. When Chalga was initially released, it buffed itself and it was a 7/7. Then it got nerfed to a 4/4 that didn't buff itself, and it was just awful. And then afterwards they said, okay, we should let it buff itself again, and it got a lot better. And this is just very common where if you have a scaling engine that doesn't buff itself like Lightfang, there's a point where you just have to sell it, and it always feels bad. Here, Fel Stomper, another example of a card that does buff itself. This went from +3 attack per summon to +2 attack. Similar to the Ghoul, this card was batshit crazy, and it's now probably just good. I'm not sure if the dinosaur is still broken. Ghoul, I'm quite confident to say that it's broken just because you get it so early, and there's no real chance for the opponents to beat it, assuming they have some tokens. Fel Stomper, it's really good, but it's later in the game, so people have had a little bit of chance to also build up their own board and have their own scaling or just build a nice board. So this one, I'm not out yet whether it's broken or just good, but I don't think this is a weak card right now. I think +2 attack per summon, if you have your Coiler, if you have your Reborn, Taunts, etc., this is still good. Sister Death Whisper is a bit of a weird one because this one was not very relevant in my games. My undead games were essentially get Anubrak, get very high attack, and maybe have Sister on the board for 1 or 2 turns just to get a little health on your units. So they don't die to a blaster. It was rare that you had a Sister on the board and it was your actual engine, because believe it or not, it was too slow. You either had very big minions that just value traded all that big health, or you got very, very high attack damage tokens that didn't really care how much health you had. Now, if the meta slows down a little bit, maybe it's there's more room for a sister build where you actually have some time to scale up and the health being more relevant, but we'll have to see about that. So we do see it getting nerfed, And I'm assuming that this was because on lower MMR, this was a problem where probably games were a little bit slower there. And then +1/+3 per reborn is quite good. So yeah, once again, this depends a little bit on the speed of the meta and how valuable that health is. Then the last change, and also a very, very important one, Eternal Summoner, instead of being an 8/1, is now a 6/1. But the functional change is that instead of it summoning 2 knights, it only summons 1 knight, but it has Reborn. Now, before, you would get a Soulsplitter and just give this Reborn. And you might say, well, that's a lot better, because now I summon 2 knights and it Reborns. While hypothetically true that it had much higher potential, it almost never really got all that potential. I don't know about you guys, but a lot of the time, my summoner got killed early and didn't quite Reborn. So by making it summon 1 knight and giving it Reborn automatically, this might just be better. Which, it felt better today. I played with it, I was like, oh, I got the value. I made it golden. I got the value. It Reborn. Oh my God. It was like, before, if you had a golden one and you gave it Reborn, it was like, yeah, that's never happening. Whereas now, a golden one sometimes Reborns. It's like, oh wow, cool. So it feels better to play with, if anything. And on Pewter's side, this is still very good to be part of your creation. Now, you can't roll this with poison, so they automatically ruled that out, where let's not make a Reborn poison, and I like that. Thank you very much, Blizzard. But you can still give this stealth, which is very, very good. Really increases the chance of getting all the value, especially if it becomes golden, but you can't really triple a creation, so scrap that. But yeah, overall, the experience playing with this card, it was still fairly powerful, and it just felt like I got all my value way more often. And the big thing is, now you either don't have to run Soulsplitter, or you can run Soulsplitter and keep your Anubrak and just Reborn the Anubrak. So yeah, while it kind of looks like a nerf in terms of like, well, I was going to Reborn it anyway, so whatever, it's just nice to play with. Like, quality of life, it just feels a lot better. And because of that, it probably also is a bit more annoying if it is on the opponent's board. So I'd still be on the lookout for this, especially if you're playing Pewter's side, even though Undead are nerfed. I personally got 2 first places with Pewter's side today, doing just this, playing summoners with maybe a little bit of Anubrak damage, but one game I didn't even get any Anubrak procs, and I just got them up to 40/40 just by getting a lot of value. You can run Titus now with this as well. Before, if you had a Titus on the board to double the death rattles, yeah, again, right? You almost never got full value. So imagine if you have a Titus, then you get twice as many Reborns. You definitely didn't get full value. Whereas now, sometimes I actually got to summon 2 knights and Reborn, and that was fine. And because of the Titus, you get that extra value. So there might be some room for builds where you're not running Soulsplitter at all, and you're maybe running Sister in the back, and you just have a Titus, and you just proc more Reborns. But yeah, that's my opinion on the patch, guys. The main takeaway is that Undead are weaker, so we should be seeing more variety in the builds. We don't have those insane Anubrak starts anymore. Here he is, where there's a triple into it, and no matter what you do, you can't have enough health to tank it. That should probably not happen, or at least be very, very rare. And the other one is that Ghoul is still very strong. So yeah, I'd say that's probably the main oversight of the patch. Ghoul's still very, very strong. You should still buy it early, and it's still going to allow you to power level to 6. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know what you think of these kind of videos in the comments, and have a great one, guys. We'll see you next time.